everyone. As you know, this is The Measure of an Episode. Our continuing mission is to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a good Star Trek episode, and not just good TV. I'm Cappy.
I'm Jonathan.
I'm Paul. So that wasn't just one of us sped up really fast.
Yes, today we've got a special guest star of my oldest daughter, where her name has now been revealed. It's Cappy, C-A-P-P-Y. Do you want to say hi? Which you already just did.
Hi.
And we're very pleased to have Cappy on the show. And so
you tell us, what are we talking about today?
our random episode generator generated, where did I write it down? The original series, Season 2, Episode 9, Metamorphosis. And the blurb is, the Enterprise crew members encounter a mysterious energy cloud that pulls them down to planet Gamma Canaris N. Okay, Cappy, did you like this episode?
No.
No?
No.
Oh.
What was your least favorite part of the episode?
When she didn't understand what the captain was saying.
You mean when she's talking to her?
When who didn't understand? The human girl or the cloud girl?
The cloud girl.
Yeah.
Confused.
Although that was very interesting to me because that was the first time that we'd gotten really to jump ahead a little bit, that we'd gotten really kind of explanation as to how the universal translators work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had thought that it just sort of does a on-the-fly translation and then spits out whatever they were saying in your own native language using the pitch and inflection of the original person saying it. That's not apparently how at least this universal translator works.
Right.
It works by, I should have written down what Spock said, but it was a nice little bit of science fiction as to how it works. It sort of is able to read energy waves from living beings and is able to discern like what you want to say.
Right, kind of like, then, basic concepts are universal.
So that was very interesting. I don't think Next Gen ever does that. They never talk about it with that level of like detail.
Yeah, it does happen in Enterprise, but we've jumped way ahead.
I liked it when the stranger was just not scared of them and just ran straight up towards them.
Yeah, he was running really fast too, like maybe a little too fast. Like maybe he should have gotten tasered. Before,
right, with how excited he was and just how friendly he was instantly.
I mean, he was not running towards them; he was charging them. Right?
Yeah. But as an army of one, and against three, I feel like they felt pretty safe.
Yeah,
even with their weapons were out, they had the Vulcan death grip.
Exactly. Well, I mean, Spock is like the linebacker of the group. Like, I don't think anybody can get through Spock.
Right.
I thought what was interesting is why was she so cranky at all of them? And she was like, I want to go home.
She was very cranky.
Well, and she's like, I blame you for everything, James.
It's like, whoa, clearly there's a history here.
Right.
We won't go into what kind, but clearly a history, especially considering it was James T. Kirk. Yeah, she was very cranky, and they don't really explain. I mean, I guess you could blame it on her sickness, but it's not established that that's what it is. I think she just wants to. I think she's mostly cranky because she needs to get to her job.
Right.
Her job is being a diplomat of some kind at Epsilon 3.
Sure.
4?
Yeah. One of the lower numbers.
Yeah. You're the math guy.
30.
You can figure it out.
6.
So one thing that I actually really liked is, so we start out inside the shuttlecraft, and nobody is driving the shuttlecraft, right?
Right.
Which is what I always have wanted from science fiction. No one would ever drive this stuff. Computers would be doing it all the time. And that's what's happening. It seems like they're sort of like when the cloud comes or whatever damage starts happening, and the lights turn down and suddenly it's like the boat ride from Willy Wonka.
Right.
Then they start sort of doing stuff, but they're never really actively driving it.
Well, yeah, but also especially after the cloud took over, like the cloud took over controls. So, I think Spock did try to do something, and he said, we've lost control of the shuttlecraft, and the ambassador was like, you need to take us back now. And Kirk, basically says, shut up. We're doing what we can, which is nothing. So we just have to wait.
Yeah. Okay. So they land on the planet, and I don't remember what happens first, but Spock says he makes some sort of measurement, and he says the environment is totally suitable for human life.
Right.
And I had this thing where Spock then proceeds to walk outside and then keel over because it's not suitable for Vulcan life. He forgot to make that,
Right.
He forgot to do that test.
It's a subtle but important distinction. There's one element in the sky that's just lethal to Vulcans.
He keeps doing that like Spock, 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 Spock. Not again.
The needs of the many, Captain.
Yeah, he just goes out there. He just keeps trying to kill himself for the needs of the many. And it sort of occurred to me when they finally get outside of the shuttle that it's almost the same landscape as every other episode whenever they beam down to something. And I mean, granted, they were kind of up on a hill this time, maybe you could argue, but it's always the same thing. It's like, I want someone to say, like, funny, we keep ending up on the same damn planet.
Oh, yeah. And
how does this
right. The planets are always rocky. There's one episode that I can think of in the first season where it is just a lush green environment. And they're given everything that they think of. But besides that, yeah, like every alien planet just looks rocky and miserable.
And I think you can always tell, obviously, when they are shooting on a set, on a stage, or when they're actually outside.
Right. Yeah, on the studio lot.
And the stuff that I've seen of this show when they're actually outside, like in the grass, it always feels like it's somebody's backyard. It never feels like they actually did any kind of scouting, right? It sort of just feels like, well, we need a grassy knoll. Hey, that one looks good.
Over by the parking lot right there. Let's go.
Right.
Well, and I think part of that is probably also because they wanted to make sure they had as much budget as possible for the special effects. That would be my thought. And so there really wasn't a whole lot of effort put into locating or location scouting. There we go. We're not locating scouts. We're scouting locations. And they had to pick the places that would be the closest for the crew to go to, so the equipment wouldn't have to travel very far either.
That's a good point. Like lights and stuff. It was not, filmmaking, I guess, still isn't very portable, but probably much less portable back in the 60s.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we've gotten much better with lighting and equipment. It's gotten a lot smaller, so it doesn't take as long.
So the guy charges them, and he doesn't sort of jog up to them, like as we said. Like he's at full speed, and then he kind of comes to a sliding halt in front of them. It's really weird.
I know. Well, because he says, "Are you real? You're not a mirage?"
It wouldn't be a Star Trek episode without a little misogyny.
Yeah,
obviously, and so he immediately gloms on to the girl and talks about how beautiful she is, as though she's not there.
Yeah,
she's like. And a beautiful one at that. Like, not talking to her.
Right.
Like, he's like talking to
while
them.
Staring straight at her.
Right. It's like, I mean, the only next step you could have taken to escalate this would be ask for a high five from all the guys. Like, am I right? Type of high five.
Right.
And so, I don't know. And he was supposed to be a good guy, right?
Yeah.
For me, I don't know if this is because this is 2020. And that was 1969, but it wasn't charming. It wasn't. Oh, he's paying her a compliment. It was just creepy.
Right.
It just read as super creepy. I was like, oh, this should be interesting. Like he's going to be a bad guy. This is them seating the bad guy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's totally what I thought too, because of actually how friendly he was to everybody. I thought that for sure he was going to turn out to be like the one who brought them down or something.
If no electronic device can work, then how is he scanning him? That's confusing.
It's a very good point. Did they say that all electronic devices don't work, or did they just say the ship doesn't work?
Yeah, they said the ship didn't have anything wrong and it should have been working just fine, but for some reason nothing was working. And his communicator wasn't working. So it would stand to reason that if all other electronic devices weren't working, then the tricorder shouldn't have been working either. So maybe it wasn't working. Maybe Bones was just trying to make Kirk feel better. He looks human. Everything that I can tell about him says that he's human.
It's also, it was also very unclear why couldn't the cloud heal the sick lady?
Right.
If she was healing Cochrane, which I was surprised to hear his name, by the way, when they finally revealed who he was.
Oh, I know. And that means nothing on the original airing of this show.
No, 0.
And so, but now, like, anyone who's ever seen First Contact and, like, they watch this episode, they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Why the cloud girl didn't want to heal her? I think she didn't want to because maybe she would want to go to the other boy, so she didn't want her to take him away from her. Well,
yeah, she was maybe a little jealous. That's possible. I never considered that. That's a good point.
Yeah, it wasn't so much that she couldn't, it was that she chose not to.
Wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never really thought about that. They never really say that explicitly, but that seems to me, I mean, because it would seem that she can heal anything.
Right.
So she was choosing not to at that point.
Yeah. She's like, nope, sorry, that lady's dead. You're just going to have to stay with me. Oh, darn. I really liked the line where they say that Cochrane died 150 years ago, and Spock says, "You wear your age very well."
Well, he's been practicing his humanisms, right?
Right.
So they get to Cochrane's house, and they make absolutely zero effort to make this a futuristic-looking house. It is perfectly lifted from the late 60s decor and dropped into this episode.
Right.
like those super flat, long chairs. That are right? And like, you know how they shoot in someone's backyard when they shoot outside? They shot in somebody's living room because they ran out of money.
Yeah, they just pulled it. Well, they pulled it from just like the neighboring set of Leave It to Beaver.
So the cloud appears. The cloud lady appears. And we watch, so they do this thing where they show Kirk, and they pan over to McCoy, and then they pan over to Spock, and it takes like 25% too long, to the point where I thought if they were just panned over one more and shown Leslie Nielsen staring at it,
yep.
Like it felt such a comedic moment because of the way that they did it.
And the music hit it too. It was da-da.
That's right. That's what did it.
Da-da.
Exactly. That's exactly why it felt that way. And what if Leslie Nielsen was the fourth guy?
That would be amazing. Well, especially because at that time he was a dramatic actor. He wasn't a comedic actor. Airplane was his first comedic role, which is what made it so funny.
But here's what's funny. He's always a dramatic actor.
Oh, I know.
When is he ever being funny?
Right.
In the sense of when Will Ferrell is on screen, he's being funny.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a couple times in The Naked Gun where he
makes a goofy face. I guess you're right.
Okay, so one of the things, like along with the cloud, was the heightened emotions. It seemed so fast for everybody to get so mad at each other in such a short amount of time. When Kirk was saying, okay, buddy, like we've put up with this long enough. I'm like, what's long enough? Like, I get that you've got a ship to go back to, but like, you haven't given this guy really a chance to explain anything.
Okay, so this is where Lost has damaged you.
Probably.
Because when weird stuff starts happening, people start asking questions, right? And they don't take just a vacant stare as an answer, right? Hoping, like waiting for the flashback to start. Like, Kirk was right. Like, he's like, he should have started shaking him by the shoulders. Like, what are we doing here? Like, why are we here? And he wouldn't answer him. And honestly, there wasn't much of a reason why he would be cagey about it.
Right.
It's not like he was hiding anything.
No.
And he didn't realize he was in love with the space cloud until later.
Right, yeah. But he was also wanting to avoid saying, like, you were brought here to keep me company forever.
Did he know that?
I think that he knew that the cloud brought the people, and I think that he knew that it was because he had told the cloud that he was lonely. I don't know if he, like, because he seemed kind of simple in this. So I don't know if he pieced...
He did seem like a dude bro, like a 60s dude bro.
Right.
A little bit.
Yeah. Just speaking of the dude bro, like, he has been on that planet for 150 years. Think about how much time that is. Like, the last time, 150 years ago was 1860. Like, so much has happened and so much time has passed. How did he know that he was supposed to still wear clothes and have that brooch on? Like, there's literally no one around. What made him think every day, I better get dressed?
I like the idea that he concluded at a certain point that people would just no longer be wearing clothing.
I feel like if you are in complete isolation, there is no reason to be modest. And I feel like over time, 150 years, or like 1.5 centuries, you would kind of forget that clothes were a thing.
I mean, he would be so far. He would be a crazy person.
Absolutely.
Because it's not even. I mean, if you were to become immortal and exist for the next 150 years, at least things would be changing around you. The novelty of your current time, the current year, would change.
Right.
So I mean, there's enough to do on this planet that you could exist probably indefinitely and not get bored.
Right.
But when you're just on, like, you have the same house that's obviously stuck in the 1960s. He hasn't done any redecorating. I think that you would go crazy. And I know he said that they have a garden or something like that. Why he would need a garden when apparently this cloud will provide everything that you need?
Right.
Because, I mean, the clothing, I'm assuming that even in the future, the clothing will eventually wear out, right? He's been given new clothing. He's been given new material things. I guess he made some things out of his old ship, but I didn't get the sense that he made his house. Did he make his house?
I felt like he did. I feel like he said something about how he reutilized, I can't think of the right word, but he took pieces of his ship and restructured it to be his house.
Did you get the impression that she could create stuff, like create matter?
No, he said something about his garden, about how like she's made that area fertile in a way where he can grow whatever he needs.
Right. Okay.
So it didn't seem like the lava creatures where they could just build anything out of nothing, but it seemed like the cloud was able to manipulate things in a certain way where it would help him. I don't think that the planet, like, she completely restructured the planet to have oxygen for a human.
Well, we don't know. I mean,
we don't. You're right.
He
but
could have.
Yeah, but I given the fact that she would die if she left the planet, I don't think it was one of those omniscient beings, or omnipotent beings where they can do what you're thinking just because you're thinking it. That was the impression I got.
Although I will say that of the episodes that we've watched, there's been a lot of sort of magical things happening, and not a lot of science fiction-y in terms of the element of the plot that moves everything forward, like the cloud lady, the magical cloud that makes its way through the ship on whichever episode we watched.
Uh-huh.
For a science fiction show, the I'm trying to think of the word. What's the screenwriting word that pushes things along? Not the MacGuffin, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That element seems to be very magical. It's at least in the episodes we've watched, it hasn't been a breaking down engine or something like that, or it's always kind of just a cloud. Right. They've used that twice now. It's a cloud that can do almost anything, right?
Yeah.
That can read your mind. It's like it seems very fantastic versus grounded in science fiction.
Sure. But I mean, then there is that old adage of technology so far advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
I suppose. Yeah. I mean, I think that in terms of what we're seeing, you would expect there to be a lot of science fiction plot devices as opposed to this magical thing happens. I mean, this was the only science fiction that happens in this show for me is Spock. Spock is our science fiction anchor, which in the another segment where we call "Why do we like Data so much?" I think that's why we like Data so much as well, is because he is our science fiction anchor. He's always giving us the
scientific plausibility, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's always been the interesting part for me, I guess. I mean, the character stuff obviously is fun too, but wrapped around. He wrapped the character around the science fiction stuff, and I think it's interesting.
Well,
that's why we like it.
Well, in this episode in particular, I like that Spock remodulates the translator to speak with the cloud, but he starts to explain with technobabble, and Kirk cuts him off.
Yes,
he's like,
yes,
if I widen the parameters, and Kirk is like, well, I don't care, just do it. Like, can you do it? Get it done. That's your that's your area of expertise.
That happens twice in this episode where Spock wants to ask all these different questions.
Oh, I know. Right. He's like, it's a perfect time. Kirk's like, not now.
Yeah. Like, Spock, quiet.
You're Kirk blurking me.
Oh, nice.
Thanks.
That'll be our first T-shirt, by the way.
Nice.
It'll just be a stoic look from Spock on the T-shirt.
I actually do want that shirt now. Like, we need to hurry up and make that. We need to have enough of a fan base, enough of a following.
I do wonder how much it would cost to license the likeness of Spock for a T-shirt. It's
Right.
probably not prohibitive, but we would definitely need to kickstart it.
See,
I'm sure it's thousands.
I
of
feel like
dollars.
anybody who knows the original series, like if they saw a shirt that said "You're Kirk blurking me," like they would absolutely know everything they need to know about that shirt. And
Wait, is it you're Kirk blocking me or Kirk? What are you saying?
Kirk blurking.
What does blurking mean? Is that part of it?
Well, because it rhymes with Kirk, just like block rhymes with cock. Like,
Oh, I get it. No, it's still funny. We can still do it.
thanks. Now that you've explained it to death, I see how that would be humorous.
Well, we'll put the explanation on the back of the T-shirt.
Just because blurk rhymes with Kirk. The same way block, ...
Right. See, this is why we understand comedy. You have to explain the comedy so
Right.
people can get it.
Exactly. The more you explain it, the funnier it is.
The funnier it gets because you get all the layers.
See, there are three things that are funny. Reference, reference, and reference. Now,
See?
the second reference is funny because I referenced the first reference. But the third reference is even funnier because it references the second reference, which is already referencing the first reference. There's so many layers.
Get Cappy back in here. We need to test this out.
Yeah, if she wasn't going to leave, she's long gone. The house is deserted. So, if you guys do want that Kirk blurking shirt, we need to have a little bit more of a following. So share it with your friends.
Transition.
Thank you. Share it with your friends. Let people know about this. If you're on Twitter, we are too. Wherever you've listened to it, leave a review so people have seen that you've seen it, and everybody wants to be like you, so they're going to listen too. And if you want to hear so many things that were deleted from this episode, you can be a part of the Patreon, and just depending on how much you want to be involved, you can subscribe to higher tiers. So one of the things that I really, really liked was, first off, the B-plot showed up when it was necessary. I thought it was cool that they didn't have the B-plot right away. About halfway through the episode, Scotty was like, man, they should be here by now. Well,
and Scotty always looks like he doesn't want to be in charge of the bridge. He always just looks begrudgingly there because he's in that section of the command or that hierarchy of command.
God, I'm
just
sixth in command. Like, how do I get up here? That should not happen. But what was cool was for the first time that I can think of, they used a technique that should be used in space and underwater, but it wouldn't be needed on land. And so he said, do a spherical sweep of the area. And that makes sense. You wouldn't just do I guess it could be simplified down to do a scan, but the fact that he said spherical sweep, you would have to go out in a sphere, which means you're hitting all areas on the X, Y, and Z.
It's sort of the thing that you like, or rather didn't like about the next-gen space stuff, is that everybody's on the same 2D plane.
Right.
They always meet each other in the same 2D plane, whereas this is taking into account the three-dimensional space, just not in a ship.
Exactly.
So they make a plan to leave. So Spock goes back to the ship to try and fix the ship, and the cloud shows up. For some reason, he throws himself to the ground, and then the cloud destroys the ship, right?
Yeah, the alignment between the special effects and the choreography did not seem quite right.
Yeah, I don't know why he threw himself to the ground. It seemed counterproductive to fixing the ship. But then
but
you must have seen it coming. Yeah.
Vulcan, yeah, the classic Vulcan play dead technique. If I had a nickel,
Very aggressive playing
I would
dead.
just be so happy.
If you had a nickel, oh, I see what you did. You
Complete
subverted my
non-sequitur.
expectations. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they devise this electric scramble thing, which is kind of fun.
Yep.
They use his radio, or his FM radio that he built.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to say, back in my whole magical thing, there are a lot of proto-Q characters.
Right. Yeah.
So this cloud, although like you said, not like the rock monster from Savage Curtain, the cloud is still very powerful, and to the point of being able to heal people, bring them back to life, embody them.
Yes.
Bring ships down from afar. I mean, it has a lot of control over the material world that is unexplainable.
Right. Well, and so apparently it can leave for a short amount of time. Well, yeah, I guess it said within 24 hours I'll be dead. So it can leave the planet kind of like holding its breath, because it went out into space to capture the shuttle and then immediately brought it back. So it's not like it is stuck to the planet, but it can't survive for any length of time off the planet.
Right. Yeah.
But it also didn't cure the lady either. She kind of said, like, if we had waited any longer, she would have been dead, and that would have been the end of it. But somehow, like, the two essences combined of what's her name, Hedford, and the cloud, like they were able to just get rid of the virus somehow.
A lot of the science fiction was when Scotty's on the bridge, where they're talking about how the mystery of the missing shuttlecraft.
Yep.
It's a lot of kind of fun science fiction stuff where they're trying to figure it out.
Well, and then, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, and he's like, then we better start digging,
right?
Or whatever. Yeah. So when Kirk is talking to the cloud, I'm sure you saw, like, there was so much of the Kirk hands when, like, he's talking about love, and it's just trying to hold on to that ball that somebody is pulling away from you, and you want to keep it, but they keep pulling on it, and so you're getting pulled forward because they're pulling on the ball, but then you have to pull the ball back. Like, I feel like that's what Kirk is. Love. You can't feel it. You can't be explained. It's
It's him trying to find what the script says, like trying to stumble upon the script as he's talking.
Yeah, and there was so much of that. I mean, I genuinely think that it's not bad. It's just so overdone, where he is constantly looking like he is struggling to find the right word. That's how his acting technique is.
Is it a technique, or is it just how he thinks acting? It's not a technique. It's just what he thinks it is. Right?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, it is a technique, because otherwise you always sound like you know what you're saying, which is what Nimoy does, as Spock, and most people do when they're acting, because they've memorized their lines, and so they've learned to just put the proper inflection in, so it sounds like they're saying it for the very first time. But to have a speech pattern where you are constantly I'm trying to avoid ums, and in the process I'm speaking like Kirk. I'm listening to myself, and I'm like constantly trying to find the right words. Gives you these pauses that would otherwise not be there if you knew in advance what you were going to say.
Yeah, somewhere in the future, he's listening. And he's like, yeah, it's not so easy, is it?
It's a lot more natural to pause like that if you're not using ums, isn't it? Like you're trying to find the right word.
Unsubscribe.
No. Share first. Talk about how we're so bad.
Yeah. So when Kirk puts on his diplomat hat, right?
Oh, yeah, that was such a good moment.
Yeah, it actually felt very proto-Picard. It sounded like the dialogue sounded like something Picard would say when trying to reason with some cloud.
Absolutely, but it was like the moment before that where Bones was like, you are, remember, like you're coming at this as a soldier, but remember we are a diplomatic ship or something like that, which really...
Well, he says you've had diplomatic training.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And I was like, well, he has?
Right. Not so far.
Where's that episode? Kirk just at a desk writing. Bones they always give these lines to Bones where it's, we're all different and that's okay philosophy. That seems to be the most consistent theme of all of these different episodes. And I'm noticing that it's always Bones that says this stuff. I wonder if that's on purpose or if they just feel like, well, Bones haven't had anything to say lately, so we should give him this.
Well, I feel like as a doctor, the Hippocratic Oath is to do no harm and to help those who need it, as far as I understand it, regardless of kind of which side they're on, And it happens in war on this planet, and I feel like that is, if there is somebody who is going to have that approach, it would definitely be the doctor.
Well, and he would have the most insight, really, as to, because he is a doctor and has probably studied more beings than anybody else, and would know that we're very different, but that makes us all the same in that kind of way. Right.
We all bleed the same blood, except for you, goblins. You bleed green.
Or clouds. Clouds don't.
Clouds don't bleed. Right. Kill them all.
Yeah. You should definitely, Jim. You got to kill the cloud. It doesn't bleed.
He's xenophobic to those who don't have.
Don't bleed.
Right. If it bleeds, we can kill it. What if it doesn't bleed?
All right, start shooting at it. Just start shooting.
Grab a vacuum.
Well, then it turns into Ghostbusters. So there's a scene where Bones, I don't know, I forgot what they're doing, but he has a Band-Aid on one of his fingers when they're like messing with something.
Oh, I didn't even notice. Okay.
Yeah, and I wonder, I was trying to remember if anything happened to him, but I wonder if that was just one of those things where he had cut himself during filming and they put a bandage over it and they felt like, well, everybody's TV screen is 8 inches wide. No one's going to know.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the wherewithal to track it to see if it should have from scene to scene.
Right. So they, the lady who, Hedford, she actually did get sick. Not during the filming, but after the episode was done, she got better. But they had to bring her back for reshoots, and she had lost a lot of weight, and she had to wear the scarf around her neck to kind of avoid the weight loss. And I wonder if something had happened to DeForest, who actually prefers Jack, but I wonder if something happened to him during that. And so the Band-Aid was during the reshoots. There weren't any notes about the Band-Aid, so I can't tell you what actually happened.
Okay. So was the sickness chlamydia? Because there is, every female day player actually did get sick after working on Star Trek and left with chlamydia.
But Billy didn't know anything about that.
So there's a point where, so the alien cloud merges with the sick lady and magically she's okay. And they do this thing which I love, where when she speaks, she says, we are not ready for that, or we can't leave. And I loved that. I was like, oh God, I want a movie now just about her.
Right.
Because they don't really go into who's speaking. I get the sense that the cloud is speaking and it's sort of taken over. And the actual doctor is now trapped in her own body and can't do anything.
Well, no, I mean, she could, well, I guess kind of, because she also said we have all the memories of the Hedford.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that she has any autonomy over herself. They're not merged into a single being like what's his name from when they merged Tuvok and Neelix.
Right. Craptacular?
Tuvix, yeah. So I would love to, but anyway, it was very intriguing. It may have been my favorite part of the whole show.
So it wasn't chlamydia, but when you said that, I was like, wow, that sounds right.
It just felt right, didn't it?
It did, and the reason why is because it was pneumonia,
a symptom of chlamydia, as you know.
What?
You have pneumonia. How? Chlamydia. How?
Oh, there's so many layers to this.
I liked that whole section, by the way. So there's a moment where she says, we're going to go and I want to feel the sun on my face. We're going to go, I would love to go out. That means they're going to go have sex, right? Like She wants, the cloud has never gotten to have sex with this guy who she's known for 150 years and has been lusting after him. They're going to go have sex, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all kinds of cloud sex.
Sun on my face means... And I don't see how Kirk's smile, like his knowing smile, he kind of smirks at him, is like, yeah, go ahead.
Right.
I'll do the same thing. I'm next. Don't
want to taint it.
He puts his figurative quarter on the Pac-Man, right? Actually, I would have loved it if they made her a new character on the Enterprise, where she's this dual character that like comes in and out. You know what I mean? Like, it would have been amazing.
Right. But there's so many times where it would have been so cool if they had kept the character to explore or spread the conflict out over a couple episodes. But, it had to, it was episodic. So it had to reset.
And there's not enough room on those sets for another character. It's just not,
right.
Like, physically not enough room.
Yeah.
Cochrane and the lady, what's her name? Hedford. Hedford. Where they kiss for the first time. And so the guy leans with the back of his head toward the camera to kiss her.
Yeah.
And he kind of goes in and basically obscures her face entirely.
Right.
And I was wondering, are they actually kissing? Or now that you say that she was sick, I wonder if they actually even kissed.
Right.
If they sort of like implied that she kissed, or that they kissed, and that they didn't. Because it doesn't even look like, I mean, there's like one of those zero chemistry things where it's just like, oh my God, like this is, not feeling anything at all.
It was definitely a better shot than the episode with the other cloud when Chekhov was kissing the Klingon woman, where he was very obviously kissing his thumbs.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Maybe the actors were not allowed to kiss or something. Although Kirk, maybe that was part of Kirk's contract. Only I do the kissing.
Right. Only I get to have my lips mashed against somebody else's.
Right. Exactly.
So when they're leaving, I actually thought like they were leaving this ambassador on the planet, and I was like, I feel like that's going to raise some questions. You know, even though Cochrane is like, don't tell anybody I'm here. I feel like Kirk could be like, I kind of have to. Like, they're going to question me as to where she went.
She's dead. That's the end of it.
Right? I know. But then Spock kind of said, you know, what about this war? And Kirk's like, there will be other ambassadors.
It was the fastest B-plot wrap-up in television history. It took less than 2 seconds.
Right. So apparently, that's the revised ending. The original ending was Spock asking if, because there were 2 women in there, if that made Cochrane a bigamist.
Well, wait a minute. The Doctor says, essentially, every life form has a male and a female, which is just, even on the planet Earth, inherently false.
Right.
Like, that's not necessarily true with anything. I mean, I understood why they said that. It's very relatable. Obviously, she would be a woman, because it couldn't have been a man. Now, that would have been ballsy.
Yeah.
If it had been a man. Right? And then it inhabits Spock.
Well, no, and then still inhabits Hedford.
I would rather see Spock do remember those movies from the 80s where the father and the son switch places?
Yeah.
And the father's all goofy.
Right.
You know?
No, I think it would be fun to have Hedford, you know, have the male inside her, and then have Cochrane, like, have that inner tumult.
Everybody switches. So Kirk goes into Bones. Bones goes into Cochrane. Cochrane goes into Kirk.
I feel like there's an episode somewhere where that happens.
Oh, I thought you meant there's an episode in there somewhere. We'll work it out. We'll write it.
No, I feel like there actually is a Star Trek episode somewhere where multiple characters. I know that's happened on another TV show, but I think it happened in Star Trek where characters lose their essence into another person.
I'm sure it does. Actually sounds familiar now that you say that.
Right.
Yeah. So then they wrap up the B plot in 2 seconds flat, and then the episode ends.
Yeah.
Right. That's he's like, I'm sure they'll find another lady to wrap up this war. Right. He doesn't seem to give a 2 craps about this Epsilon 3 war.
It's like right, the war. I could not
it's
care
a
less.
War.
Right.
Like, how many hundreds of thousands of people are dying?
Whatever. Cochrane's happy. Let's leave her.
And that was the end of that. That was it.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like if that had been Picard would have been like, I understand your desires and I understand your reluctance to leave, but there are hundreds of thousands of lives that depend on you being there. And he would have had to, and the Cloud would have had to leave the body, and they would have had to take her right away to the ship to get her medicine, or the Cloud would have had to go do the mediation knowing that it was going to die.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there would have been some sort of sacrifice that somebody makes.
Yeah.
That like the Cloud chooses to kill all of the people in the war, and it upsets Picard because they've ended Next Gen episodes like that where it's not a happy ending.
Right.
But this is a happy ending.
Oh yeah.
As far as I can tell.
Well, yeah, except for the war thing, but yes.
No, it's fine. They're going to find another lady and,
right.
and the war will. But you're right. I think there would have been some sort of sacrifice made by one side. Unless they just left an iPad with FaceTime and she could have,
diplomatized.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the word.
So the last episode with Lwaxana, where I kind of looked up the stuff about the writer and how he was not happy with the episode either, and it was the last one he wrote, and he actually had a nom de plume, was the word that I was trying to think of, had me look up this one. It was written by Gene Kuhn. I don't know if you saw that or not, but Gene Kuhn is basically the Jack Kirby to Gene Roddenberry's Stan Lee. Like
really interesting.
Yeah,
oh.
He came up with basically everything in the Star Trek universe. He came up with the Klingons. He came up with the United Federation of Planets. He came up with Starfleet Command as the Enterprise's operating authority. He came up with the Prime Directive. He came up with Khan. He came up with the eugenics war, and like that's plus Zefram Cochrane, which wasn't too important until First Contact, but like. Right. I mean, that so many of those things are what makes Star Trek Star Trek.
And it always makes me wonder, did they did he invent, or did they invent Star Trek sort of over the course of many years, like of sitting down, drinking with your drinking buddies and sort of just slowly kind of mapping it out? Or was it an earnest, I'm going to write a TV show, and I'm going to, like sort of the way Joss Whedon might write a TV show, where you've been assigned to this TV show, make the universe, and they sit down and make it, or you know what I mean? Like,
right.
What was the inception or the birth? How did it come to be?
Right.
I'm sure we can find out. I'm sure you can find out.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to require a little bit more research. Or the potential guest on our podcast.
Right. Gene Roddenberry will be our guest on the next episode. So please tune in.
He'll sound surprisingly like a 10-year-old girl.
Yeah, I'm going to say not a Star Trek, not a good Star Trek episode. There just wasn't enough. I mean, aside from all the Spock stuff and the Scotty stuff, it just wasn't inherent enough to the plot line, and I just don't feel like it I mean, maybe we're getting, like, this is episode 15, I think. We're getting there where I'm thinking maybe we need to revisit our criteria, but at this point, I didn't think it was a Star Trek episode.
See, and I thought it was. I mean, obviously there was all the sci-fi stuff, which wasn't integral to the plot, which previously there was the Neelix episode, which you said if you were invested enough, it didn't matter how integral it was to the plot. So I would say that alone should give you reason to say it was a Star Trek plot. But in addition to that, it dealt with an alien being that was holding them on the planet, and they convinced it to let them go through the power of love. It was a sci-fi conflict with a non-sci-fi solution.
I suppose I don't really look at it as a sci-fi conflict, though, just because there wasn't. What was the sci-fi conflict? That this alien being was magically making all of their electronics not work. Like, it wasn't that was a device to make sure they could remain on the planet, so they had to reason with it. But it to me, there wasn't enough. I don't know. There wasn't enough procedural stuff, right? I was kind of excited that they were going to spend a little bit of time on the Enterprise with Scotty going through all the mystery stuff, which would have been half of an Enterprise episode, or not Enterprise, Next Gen episode, where they're just sort of figuring stuff out and going through all the procedural stuff. Where I think it's probably less than a minute, right, that they spend on the Enterprise in this episode.
Sure.
So, I mean, that could be what I'm looking for, is not just technobabble like we've talked about before, but some sort of expression of it, some sort of, like, take us through something, bring us along in your exploration of the mystery.
Yeah, but again, I feel like you're saying that's going to make it a good Star Trek episode, but I'm not arguing whether or not it was a good Star Trek episode, which I think it was, but I'm saying it was a Star Trek episode. Now, right. You and I can disagree on the quality of the Star Trek episode, but
I liked the episode. I thought it was entertaining, for sure. And I was surprised. I mean, it sort of kept me guessing on what was going to happen.
Right.
I should have. I feel like I should have seen it coming, that the cloud was going to embody the lady.
Right. I actually thought it was just going to make her better.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah. And then she just randomly came out of the hut, and she's like, I'm all better. We are all better.
We're all better. That's not weird.
Right. Something tells me that sentence is a lie. Cool. All right.
Let's see what we're watching next.
Yep. Next Generation, Season 6, Episode 9, The Quality of Life. Original air date, November 16th, 1992. And the blurb: when LaForge is assigned to survey a new mining development, Dr. Farallon uses her new robot called an exocomp to repair a power grid.
Oh, I love this episode.
I absolutely remember this episode.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, man. Let's go watch it.
All right.